Welcome back to beating every PS2 game, where we take on the ultimate challenge of beating every PS2 game ever made. This week we're playing Midway Arcade Classics. So yeah, this game features a bunch of different arcade classics. If that doesn't sound like it's for you, then you might as well skip this one, because there's no real PS2 games here. The first game up was 720 Degrees. 720 Degrees is a skateboarding arcade game developed and published by Atari Games in 1986. Control a skateboarder who must perform various tricks and stunts in order to earn points and advance to the next level. The objective of the game is to earn a high score by performing tricks such as ollies, grinds, and flips, while avoiding obstacles such as pedestrians and cars. Here I take on the first park, and it was the controls were pretty hard. I ended up getting a bronze just for making it to the bottom. I bought a hot board for $50, drove to the next skate park. This one I didn't realize I was supposed to do tricks in the air, so I kind of just tried to land in the diamonds on the jumps. So because I didn't know I had to do tricks, I ended up not qualifying for this one. So I just kept on riding and went to the next park. This one was a half pipe, and again, wasn't really sure how to do tricks, but I ended up with a bronze. Bought myself some new hot shoes, and I had to ride and do more tricks to get another park ticket within the time limit, and I ran out of time. I ended up dying. So yeah, the next game was Blaster. So Blaster is a side-scrolling arcade game developed and published by Williams Electronics in 1983. In the first level, it almost reminded me of like a very primitive Star Fox. You had to fly through all the arches while shooting enemies that are coming towards you. The game is set in a post-apocalyptic future where the player controls a lone survivor who must battle against hordes of mutants and other creatures to reach the end of the level. In this level, you had to catch the spacemen and save them from the asteroids and being in space. And in the third wave, apparently these things were vampires, and I ended up dying here. And the next game is Bubbles, developed by Williams Electronics and released in 1982. Here you play as a bubble in a kitchen sink. Goal is to clean the sink while avoiding enemies and obstacles. I think I ended up doing pretty well on this one. Definitely want to avoid the giant ants and the brushes and the razor blades. But you also want to try and get to the center when it's flashing green. And yeah, I ended up in 11th place. Not bad. And the next game is Defender, which was developed and released by Williams Electronics in 1980. You control a ship that must defend the planet from waves of alien invaders. You also have to rescue the people that the aliens are abducting. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of this one, and I think I died pretty quick. And the next game was Defender 2, which is the sequel to Defender. This one was released by Williams Electronics in 1981. It has a similar premise. They just added a few different things to the game. And again, I was not a huge fan of this one. The next game was Gauntlet, which was released in 1985 by Atari Games. This game is a fantasy-themed dungeon crawling hack and slash game where you can play as one of 4 characters on a mission to explore mazes and defeat monsters. Now, I used to love this game as a kid, and I think it still holds up pretty well, although it's a lot harder than I remember. So I made it to level 4. I think this game's a lot easier when you have teammates. So yeah, I ended up dying here to the clearing out the ghost nest. Still a great game. The next game was Joust, which was released in 1982 by Williams Electronics. In this game, you control a knight riding a flying ostrich, battling against other knights riding vultures. I've always loved this game when I was a kid. I think it's because the colors and the premise of the game just always felt cool to me. And I think I did pretty well on this one. Always loved Joust. But guess what the next game is? It's Joust 2. So yeah, the next game is Joust 2, released in 1986 by Williams Electronics as a sequel to Joust. Now the gameplay is very similar in this one compared to the first game, but there are different levels and different enemies to encounter. And I think this one is a little bit harder, but I enjoy this one more than the first game. Just Joust, baby. I couldn't figure out how to kill that giant one. I didn't know what that was. If anyone knows how to kill it, leave a comment. And the next game was Klax, released by Atari Games in 1989. This one is a puzzle game where you have to catch colored tiles that fall from the top of the screen and arrange them by color in a certain order at the bottom of the screen. So each level gets progressively more difficult, and eventually I ended up just quitting out because it wanted me to get to like 10,000 points, and it just would have taken forever. And again, this series is called Beating Every PS2 Game, not Beating Every Arcade Game. It was fun to play through all these games again and just try them out one more time. And the next game was Marble Madness, released in 1984 by Atari Games. In this one, you control a marble and navigate through various obstacles to reach the end of each level. I knew this one was a pretty popular game, and I think it still holds up okay. There's definitely some delays on the controller, so it makes it hard to control the marble. But I think originally it was at a table with like a spinning ball type of controller, so it's understandable. But yeah, I made it to level 3 and then ended up running out of time. Now the next game was Paperboy, released in 1985 by Atari Games. This game was a classic. You play as a paperboy on a bicycle delivering newspapers to houses on a suburban street. Wow, you gotta dodge tons of obstacles. If you never played this one, I'd recommend playing it, because my cousins and I spent countless hours playing this game on the NES, and we would just die laughing for hours. I don't think it holds up as well as it did back then, but it's still worth a try. We used to just launch the newspapers at everything in sight. Just a legendary game. And at the end there's a little obstacle course here. Yeah, then on the second level, I think I crashed into something here. And it was game over. Legendary game. The next game was Rampage, released in 1986 by MIDWAY. You control one of 3 giant monsters who have been transformed by a mad scientist. You then navigate through a city, destroying buildings and fighting off the military while avoiding a whole bunch of hazards. Now, I used to love this game as a kid, but it really doesn't hold up that well. It's honestly kind of boring now. This game is also the inspiration for the movie Rampage with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The next game was Rampart, released in 1990 by Atari Games. So you control a medieval castle and you must defend it from enemy ships. Shoot cannons at them during each round, and in between rounds you have to repair and rebuild your walls, and then use your cannon again to destroy more ships. It's kind of a cool design. I think the premise is kind of cool. But yeah, this wasn't really one of my favorite games. I ended up dying on the second round here. And the next game was Road Blasters, released in 1987 by Atari Games. This game's a racing game where you have to race through various obstacles and enemies to reach the finish line. Your car has a gas system, so you gotta pick up gas the whole time you're driving and shoot the obstacles that are in your way. And eventually I crashed and then I ran out of fuel. The next game was Robotron 2084, released in 1982 by Williams Electronics. The game's a fast-paced shooter where you have to fight off hordes of robots while rescuing human survivors. This game was really fun, and I'm sure it inspired many games that came after it. But I crashed into a triangle and it was game over. The next game was Satan's Hollow, released in 1982 by MIDWAY. In this one, you have to defend against waves of enemies while building a bridge to Satan's Hollow. I didn't even realize you had to build a bridge, and I died pretty quickly in this one. I didn't really like the gameplay too much, but the art design was really cool. And the next game was Sinistar, released in 1982 by Williams Electronics. In this one, you control a spaceship and have to fight off waves of enemy ships and collect resources to build Cinnabons in order to defeat the evil planet-destroying entity known as Sinistar. This game was cool, but I died pretty fast. The next game was Smash TV, released in 1990 by Williams Electronics. You control a character and must fight off waves of enemies in a game show setting. This one was pretty cool, although I died pretty early into playing it. Feels kind of similar to Robotron 2084, so maybe that's where they got the idea from, about the top-down shooters. So that's cool. And I died by stepping on a mine. I didn't realize those were mines. The next game was Splat, released in 1983 by Incentive Software. Yeah, in this one you had to catch food and throw it at your opponent. And catch keys and just catch anything that's being thrown at you. This one was pretty wild. I was just launching stuff everywhere. And eventually I got hit and I died. And the next game was Spy Hunter, released in 1983 by MIDWAY. In this one you control a high-tech sports car and navigate through various obstacles and enemy vehicles. The car has many gadgets and weapons such as machine guns, oil slicks, and smoke screens. And this one just kind of felt repetitive and boring. But I know it is a classic. And I crashed into a tree and it was game over. The next game was Super Sprint, released in 1986 by Atari Games. This one is a racing game where players race through various obstacles and enemy cars to reach the finish line. This game was really hard and it feels pretty good for its time. Controls were a little tough, but sometimes you would get lucky and just hit a corner just right. That's all you would need to get to the next level. I think I won like every other race on this, so I was just hanging on by a thread. This one was track 6. This one was track 2. They added a jump in the middle of the track. On this one I even lapped some of the guys. Yeah, this one was hard. You can get caught inside those doors and your run's pretty much over. So yeah, I came in 4th place and I lost. So the next game was Root Beer Tapper, released in 1983 by MIDWAY. In this one you control a bartender and have to serve root beer to customers while hurrying to grab the used mugs before they fall and shatter. I played this game a lot when I was younger, but it definitely felt more challenging this time around. And I ended up dropping some mugs and I lost. I kept hitting too many at a time and that made me lose. Like right here I throw 3 on accident. Game over. The next game was Tubin, released in 1988 by Atari Games. In this one you control a guy on an inner tube and must navigate him through some various obstacles and enemies to reach the end of the level. He's just some guy on an inner tube. I started off doing pretty well, but it got progressively harder and I got sucked into a whirlpool and got a game over. This whirlpool came out of nowhere. Finally, we have Vindicators, released in 1988 by Atari Games. In this one, you control a tank with constantly draining fuel and must navigate through multiple levels of enemies. Controls were tough on this one and I eventually died, but I was just happy to be finished with this game. And there you have it, we completed Midway Arcade Classics. So yeah, this isn't the type of game I wanted to play because it was all old arcade games, but we played through it anyway. So take a sneak peek at next week's video. The next game we're going to play is Stretch Panic. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you want to see more of this series. Thanks.